Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Sorry, it's a little bit big loud noise. Apologize for that. We welcome you today to our work session this morning on July 10th, 2023, here in the hearing room of our Larimer County Administrative Services. I am Larimer County Commissioner Jody Shaddick McNally. I'm Chair of the Board of County Commissioners, joined by my colleagues, Larimer County Commissioner Kristen Stevens and Larimer County Commissioner John Gonfalez. We are here for a work session regarding EV charging station roadmap, and we have several folks who are here in our audience. And I'm going to also introduce a few people here in the room. They're helping us with this presentation, which I'm really excited to hear about, which is our Larimer County Commissioner, Lorenda Volker, and Heidi Pruis, our climate smart and climate ready the program manager. And with us we have a couple of folks. I'm going to have her introduce. We have some great partners, including Andrew, but I'm going to have you introduce your guests today and have you proceed. And we have a lot of information to cover, so thank you very much.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Heidi Pruis, Climate Sustainability Manager for the county. I do have with me two guests today who are really going to be making the presentation for you. This is our EV charging station plan for Larimer County, and this is a multi-year process, so you're going to hear a lot about it today. With me, I have Andrew Holder from Xcel Energy, Partners in Energy Program, and Becca Stock from the Brendel Group. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Andrew.
Make sure I hit this thing correctly. Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for your guys' time here this morning. We are very excited to present what we have gathered over the last 6+ months in regards to information detailing out what we have entailed in this presentation today. With Xcel Energy, we have a number of different partnerships, one being with the Brendel Group. And we have, like Heidi mentioned, that Becca Stock is joining us here this morning, and she's going to give you the bulk of kind of the presentation here this morning. But without further ado, I'll kind of kick it over here to Becca and start walking through what we've outlined here so far.
Great, thanks, Andrew. As mentioned, I'm Becca Stock. I am the kind of lead Partners in Energy facilitator for this EV project. So I just wanted to talk you through kind of the basics of how we got to this plan and kind of what's included in the plan. So here's the agenda for today. Want to just take a minute to introduce the Partners in Energy program so you kind of know what the program is and how and why we're here. Share the development process so you can see who's been involved and how we got to what we got to. Kind of talk about what the outcomes of this plan are and how we're going to implement that plan going forward. So, what is Partners in Energy? First of all, I want to introduce kind of the couple of teams that have been working on this plan. We've got Andrew and Michaela from Xcel Energy, who have been kind of our representatives from the company there. Myself, Shelby, and Andrea have been the Partners in Energy facilitators, been working through this, holding the stakeholder meetings, and we'll be working through implementation as well. And then Heidi's been our liaison for the county. And this has kind of been the core team that's been moving this forward, and then we've had a larger stakeholder team providing input into the plan. So Partners in Energy is a 2-year collaboration with communities within Xcel Energy's territory. The first 6 to 8 months of that is the planning process, where we invite stakeholders to give feedback on whatever goals the community has that relates to energy. So in this case, it's public EV charging, but it could be energy efficiency, it could be renewable energy, it could be any of those things. And then the next 16 to 18 months, we support the beginning of the implementation of that plan. We really want to get the communities off to a quick start, make sure they're successful, and kind of get that ball rolling. And then we'll kind of pass it off to the community to keep working on it, with the opportunity to come back for graduate support as needed. So if you guys come up with an amazing project that you'd really like to help have some support on, we can certainly continue to support you in that way. So some people kind of ask, why would Xcel pay for this? What's their stake in the game? And it's really to understand better what the energy needs of the community are. With EVs and building electrification and all this stuff coming online, understanding where communities are and where they're headed is really important for Xcel to have their programs fit the community's needs, as well as kind of the future infrastructure planning to better serve the community. And then also just kind of that, making that connection between Xcel Energy and the community just keeps that line of communication open to make sure that anything that might come up gets addressed appropriately in the appropriate amount of time. This is just a quick snapshot of the Colorado Partners in Energy communities. So you can see all along the Front Range, there's communities that have been participating in this. The kind of orangey dots are those in planning. The blue ones are in implementation. And then all those red dots are graduate communities. They may be still engaged, or they may have moved on to other things. So you can see we've been very active in the community, and you guys have the opportunity to engage with these communities on kind of semi-annual events to hear what other communities are doing in this space. So for planning, Partners in Energy provides facilitation and guidance. So that I mentioned that we have a team of 3 that facilitates workshops, develop materials, things like that. We also do data analysis as appropriate for the planning process. So I'll show you some of that stuff that we did to inform this plan. And then just basic project management stuff, making sure that everyone's there at the right time and the plan gets written and things like that. So this is the outcome of the planning process. We've got your own plan here. You would have gotten a copy of it with the materials today, and we can look at any parts of it you'd like to after this presentation. And this really guides that implementation phase. You'll see that most of these strategies in there are kind of geared towards that 18-month implementation period to really get things off and running. So I'll pause for questions real fast to see if there's any questions about Partners in Energy in general before I dig into the plan.
It doesn't seem we have any questions. Please proceed. Thank you.
Alrighty, so at the very beginning of this planning process, we sort of identified that we wanted this plan to address the opportunities for building out a public EV charging network within the county, leveraging Xcel Energy and other community partners, knowing that Larimer County has a lot of different players in this space, and so just getting all of those people in the same room was a really important goal in this plan. This kind of gives you the quick outline. We started in November with sort of the intake and what do we want to do, and kind of doing some initial calls to figure out who do we want to have involved in this process. We had our first workshop in January. And then we did some kind of interim calls, some mapping based on that first workshop and priorities. Had our second workshop in March. And then we kind of sort of built the plan after that second workshop. And then our third workshop was really, did we get this plan right? Where do you guys want to plug in? That sort of conversation. So now we're coming to you in this kind of last stage. See, did we get it right? Do we need to make any adjustments? And then we'll move into that implementation period after this. This eye chart, apologies for the teeny tiny text, is all of the folks that helped make this plan possible. The top section in blue are all of the people that attended one or all of our workshops. And you can see we've got folks there from Larimer County, folks from Xcel Energy, actually they're down in the red, Poudre Valley REA, State of Colorado. So we had kind of all those kind of big players. The MPO also joined us there. And then we've got kind of those other contributors at the bottom. And these are folks that are working on their own EV work, their own public charging, their own fleet stuff. And we just want to kind of understand how our plan might interact with their work, but didn't necessarily need them to commit the time for the full stakeholder meeting. And I will say we're likely to continue these targeted interviews. I think Heidi just sent me some information the other day about the YMCA and how we might be able to connect with them. So that will probably continue throughout implementation.
I'm glad to see that our partners at Poudre Valley Rural Electric Association, Poudre REA, involved, and that's really exciting to see. I'm just curious, I mean, this is just a typo, but I see our Eric Tracy listed twice on the list, or maybe that's just on my list, but I just...
No, that's
okay.
a typo.
I just wanted that, maybe he was doing so much work he got counted twice. Which could be, because Eric's everywhere. Also, I'm really thankful to see our school district partners, and I didn't know if we reached out to Estes Park School District too, because they've been working together, Estes Park and Thompson School District and Poudre School District on mental health issues for youth and some other workforce development things, and I thought this might be another opportunity to loop that school district in, because they do have probably some of the similar questions and answers, and especially that's such a small school district, it might be great for them. So I'm just curious about that. So thank you. Commissioner Stevens or anybody else have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that comment. I will put them on my list. We did not get in touch with them, but we did Trudy from Poudre School District didn't mention that there's sort of this thinking about a group buy of EV buses. So
Yeah.
I think it would be great to reach out to them and try to get them in the loop.
Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to dig in. I'm going to do just a high level of what's in the plan. If there's anything you guys want to talk about in more detail, we absolutely can. But just starting, these are sort of the big chapters: introduction, sort of why we wanted to build this plan, where are we now is your baseline data, what we know about the county that would influence our decisions on public EV charging. Where are we going is sort of the visioning, our goals for the future, and then how we're going to get there is really the meat of how we're going to get there, those strategies and who's going to do what and when. And the final part, the how we stay on course, is just who's going to be working on this and how are we going to structure those implementation groups. So I'll kind of give a quick overview of each of those sections, and then we can talk about any specifics. So the introduction starts with kind of how this plan ties into the overall goals of the county. We've pulled a couple of kind of motivators for EV planning, really with greenhouse gas emissions and air quality kind of leading the way for some of the issues that the county's been working on. But knowing that fuel costs and transportation costs are a big concern for some parts of the county especially, so we didn't want to lose sight of that and make sure that we're keeping that front and center as well. We also did some kind of baseline information, including geography, populations, housing characteristics, commuting characteristics, transportation costs, and kind of other related planning efforts that are going on at the state or county levels. This kind of small map over here is just an example of the type of analysis that we did. This is showing the percent of homes that are owner-occupied, because we know that owner-occupied houses are more likely to be able to install their own EV charging at home and not need public EV charging as much. So what this is telling us is that Fort Collins might need more public EV charging because they've got a lower rate of owner-occupied housing, whereas areas like Timnath or Wellington are more likely to have charging at home. So just sort of that kind of basic information to help us understand the variety of needs across the county, because it is a big space with a lot of different types of communities. And then we did some kind of analytics to look at, are we on track to hit our goals? So the goals that we pulled are from the state's analysis of what the public charging would be needed for the county to hit the state's EV targets in 2025 and 2030. So you can see here these kind of blue bars are the uptick of, this is level 2 charging. We also did it for level 3, and we'll see that again later. But that's sort of the uptick of level 2 charging that we've seen across the county since 2011. So you can kind of see that kind of curve starting. And what I did is just said, okay, if we continue at this rate, that's kind of the lower bound of that red area. And then the upper bound is like if we kind of get a little bit more of an exponential intake, because that's what we've been seeing in a lot of communities across the country. And that's that upper bound of that wedge of where we think the EV charging is going to be. So as you can see, we seem to be on track to hitting the 2025 goal for level 2 charging within the county, which is great news. The not so great news is that 2030 target is way up there. So obviously some longer term kind of setting the stage for a kind of accelerated input between 25 and 30 would be our goal there. We'll see the level 3 one later when we talk about goals and targets. Unfortunately, we're not on track for 2025 for level 3 or DC fast charging, and there's still a significant gap in 2030. So the moral of the story is there's a lot of work to be done, but there are a lot of people working in this space too. So it's not on the county to do all of this work. So how we're going to get there, these are the two kind of summary tables of our 2 focus areas. So the way that we thought about this was promoting EV charging in population centers, sort of where people live that own EVs. How are they going to charge their EVs? And that can be kind of mostly along the I-25 corridor in those communities there. And then our destination and corridor charging is thinking about all the places that people travel to within Larimer County. You guys have such great open spaces and lots of people come in. How do we support those folks as well? We did kind of exclude the NEVI charging, which is what the state's working on for those designated NEVI corridors, and we're looking at kind of other corridors that could be applicable. So you can think of like North Poudre Canyon, up between Loveland and Estes, and some of those that were our focus instead. So here we have kind of 3 strategies pulled out in the population centers. One is just to build this local working group. So we have a lot of folks working on a lot of things in these areas, and we want to make sure that we're being coordinated and not duplicating as much as possible. And so this might include the school districts, this might include CSU, this might include the MPO, Poudre Valley REA, those types of folks to make sure that we're connecting people who want to install charging with the right resources. Or if this grant comes out and says, hey, anyone want to install a bunch of charging? We have $5 million for you. We can kind of get that group together and say, hey, what do we do for this grant application? The second one is to develop kind of an informational packet for businesses. And so this was identified through kind of economic development type folks saying, hey, businesses are kind of interested, but they don't really know what it means for them as a business to install charging. So this is just information to help them understand if it's the right business choice for them and what the costs might be and how they might choose between a level 2 charger and a level 3 charger. And then our third strategy there is to help communities that don't have an EV plan. So the only two in Larimer County that do are Fort Collins and Estes. I know Fort Collins is about to update theirs as well. And so for those that don't, we're going to provide them kind of with a mini, pick and choose as you'd like template to say, hey, you want a quick and easy EV plan? Here's some things you can do to promote EVs in your community and kind of set them up for grant applications and things like that so they can say, yeah, we've got a plan without a lot of effort. And again, those are all sort of setting the stage for these kind of longer term level 2 mostly. We're trying to get some DC fast charging in there, but it's tricky. The destination corridor charging is got 4 strategies here. One is to just maintain a ledger of opportunities, and this also came out of this. There's so much grant money flying around right now. We need to have ready projects that we can say, oh yeah, we want to put 3 level 2 chargers on, here on 287.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go.
So with the gap, I'm going to say gaps, with the variability of where different communities are, sorry, I don't mean to lean,
Yeah.
because I'm looking at this
Yeah.
and my screen. What's the best return on investment? You said level 2 and then level 3. Do we need to still have both, or should we just be investing, because technology and things are changing so quickly, is more a return on investment to invest, not in the latest and greatest, but somewhere kind of not the older stuff, but you know what I'm saying, and not the latest and greatest, but something that's not going to be outdated in 6 months.
Yes.
Because and if so, when you talk about some of these areas that you're looking at, because we are in a destination county for a lot of folks, we have a lot of outstanding parks, and I see our director of natural resources is on here, Dalen Figgs, which I was really thrilled to see because we do have a lot of folks coming from other parts of the country, of the area and of the country, and coming through our county. So have we, obviously looking at strategically, where are those stations to charge, and maybe also incentivize people to go to certain locations and charge there, and that helps with the overall cleaner air on some of our open spaces because they're taking electric vehicles. So there's a lot of packed in those questions. I apologize, but this has all been spinning in my head the last 10 minutes. So hope that's not too much to ask. Okay, thanks.
I will start with your kind of where do we invest? Most of the guidance we're seeing right now is about 80% of your charging should be level 2 charging, and that's charging that could get you a decent charge in 4 hours, a full charge in about 8 hours-ish, depending on your vehicle and other things. So, for example, like if you're a trailhead and you plug in and you go for a nice hike and you come back and your car's been kind of topped off, that would be a great application. The DC fast charger should be about 20%, and that's areas where people are spending 15 to 30 minutes. So let's stop and get coffee and top off our car on our way to Estes or whatever.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. The other kind of component is for businesses is we've had a lot of conversations about what their business model is, and do you want to encourage people to stick around, or do you want them to park and get their stuff and leave? And so we really need to match the right business type with the right charging type to make sure that we're adding benefit to the business and not taking up one of their parking spots that doesn't benefit them. So,
Commissioner Stevens, and then you could get back to my other question, but Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, one of the questions I have is, are you seeing folks change some of their land use planning because of this? Or building codes, because I'm thinking about multifamily really is an area where this is desperately needed, because if I own a home, I can install something quite easily, or it's not that expensive, it's not that cost prohibitive. if I'm a renter, which almost 50% of people in Fort Collins, let's say, are, how do we make sure we're getting that charging not just in businesses, but that people can charge by their homes? Because especially with the level 2 charger, an 8-hour charge, you're not going to leave your car at the library for 8 hours and then hike to your apartment. So do we have any sense of like how that's going to work for multifamily, and are folks preparing for that piece?
That's a great question, and yes, codes are one of the tools that you can use for that. We've seen communities kind of go either way, either like incentivizing multifamilies to install EV charging, or sort of baking into their code and saying you have to. And I think that depends on where in the EV journey a lot of communities are and how comfortable they feel making those recommendations. So that would be something that we could include, that we likely will include in strategy P3 under kind of that template of how you build an EV-friendly community. So encouraging folks to say, yeah, we really want to at least install the conduit for EV charging at all multifamily that goes in, because that's a no cost essentially when you're building a multifamily, and it sets you up for installing those charging stations in the future. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does.
Great.
Thank you.
Mr. Kofalis.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all. One question I have at the moment, I'll save my others. I'm not seeing Platte River Power Authority listed as one of the energy partners, and given that they are the wholesale providers of electricity for for 4 municipalities, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that long-term they should be included. The reason that we didn't pull them in the planning process is both Estes Park and Fort Collins already had EV plans, and so we didn't want to duplicate their plans, and so we kind of avoided those communities. Not to say that Loveland, is not also an important community as well, but we were focused more on those other areas because those 2 communities already had their EV plans. But I do know that, Platte River is talking about their own EV incentives. And so I think kind of baking that into, especially some of these communications around what does it take to do EV charging at my location. One of the complicating factors in Larimer County that we're going to have to manage is who's your provider, because there's a lot of options, and what community do you live in, and how do you navigate the utility and the permitting process in those 2 opportunities. All right. Are there any questions that I didn't answer before?
Well, I was trying to go back to my first question was kind of loaded. I was trying to think, did we get all that answered? But maybe we did. So if it comes back up, I'll bring it up. So do you remember? I think there was a couple other things I had.
I think the one thing that maybe I didn't address directly was the technology, like what's going out of style, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
So level 2 charging is pretty standardized. And so you can feel comfortable installing level 2 charging. All the EV providers are installing the same chargers in their vehicle. That I feel pretty good about, not worrying about it going obsolete. The DC fast charging is still in evolution. I think it's starting to sort of think about standardizing, but it's not yet. So a lot of those DC fast chargers have multiple options for your plugs. And there's some evolution in kind of how fast the charge is, and I think that's going to continue to evolve. I just saw an article the other day about Toyota coming up with some solid-state battery technology that might make that charging even faster, so we might see continued evolution in that DC fast charger space. And I think, again, partnering with your local utility, because some of those power draws are getting pretty substantial. So that's where I'd be just a little bit aware of what you're purchasing and how future-proof it is.
Yeah, my son's doing some work and research in this space, so that's why I kind of don't. There's some stuff down the road, but I'm curious. There's a lot the plugins.
Mm-hmm.
There's the 2 level. Is that able to address the different plugins right now? Or are we getting standardized? Because I know in the past it's been time out that if you have this car, you have this plugin. If you have that car, you have that. Is that still an issue? Are we getting standardized going forward, or how is that going to impact some of these planning out as we go forward?
I think there are some manufacturers that still need to work out that, especially the DC fast charging, they're not standardized on the plug yet. And I think the way American cars and European cars are going is not necessarily in the same route. So that is a place that I'm keeping an eye on and want to be cautious about. my understanding is a lot of those charging providers, because usually no one wants to maintain a DC fast charger, they have a provider that comes in and does it, has multiple plug options at the same charger to account for that. It's not ideal, but that's sort of how they're working around that, and that would let you kind of adjust in the future as well moving forward.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to keep asking all these
No.
questions, but appreciate it. And I'll let you proceed because I know, a time check for you. How are we doing on your presentation for time?
We're doing on fine, especially since we're peppering in questions as we go.
Awesome.
So,
Thank
we're
you.
great. I forgot where I was though. We'll go to destination and corridor charging. Oh yes, Ledger. So this is just intended to be sort of our way of tracking what opportunities we're thinking about. Have we contacted that kind of owner of the property? Are they on board? Do we have funding for that sort of thing, so we can kind of keep things moving. This is sort of a PM team mostly opportunity, but maybe used with that larger working group as well. The second one there is installing EV charging at high traffic county locations. So this is really county specific, making sure that the county's practicing what they preach, and that we get EV charging in kind of those areas that we think are the first biggest bang for our buck opportunities. And then the third one there is just making sure that the county has the appropriate policies for those charging stations, that people understand when I go to plug in at a county location, I can park there for 2 hours, or I can park there all day, or whatever it is. This is what it's going to cost me, that sort of thing.
So
Yeah.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
does that mean the plan includes installing level 2 EV chargers at this building at some point? Because in the past, it's been suggested it's cost prohibitive.
I think we've discussed that. I know that there's some infrastructure costs. We did talk to the city of Fort Collins as well, and they're also having kind of that similar problem. So I have a strategy in mind to see if there's an opportunity to partner with the city and see if we can get some downtown EV charging, even with the infrastructure problems that we know we have.
So is that yes or no?
That's a maybe. We'll play with it and see if it works.
I guess I'll take a maybe at this point. Thank you.
We're thinking about it. We're working on it. I can't make any promises. How about that? It has come up for sure in conversations about a place that we'd like to have it, knowing the infrastructure issues. And then the last one is sort of an interesting one and sort of a more long-term one, but this is exploring the opportunities for a resiliency hub. And so the idea here is that we would kind of pick, I'm going to use this as an example, it's definitely not set in stone, but let's say Stove Prairie School. Is this a place that we kind of, if there's a big fire, people congregate there, can we put charging and generation and batteries all in that location, so it's sort of a self-sustaining emergency hub? It's been thrown around. We think it's a really interesting idea. We still need to kind of, think about where that might be, and if we have any property owners that are interested, and if there's grant funding that can support it. But that's kind of a longer-term strategy that we'd like to explore as well.
So with that, since I've been talking a lot of resiliency and resiliency hubs with our Office of Emergency Management, I'm assuming you're having conversations with them because they're stellar in this space. And I think that is something that networking or that groundwork has already been laid about how we kind of know where maybe some of those optimal points are. So I'm very, very interested in that piece of this presentation. So thank you.
Perfect. I will say that's kind of our first step in implementation, is talk to our emergency services, figure out what those locations might be, and then talk to those property owners and see if any of them are interested or willing. So
Thank you.
Yep. All right. And then this last chapter, how we stay on course, I just wanted to highlight there's kind of 3 teams that will be working on this. One is the PM team, and that's that same team I showed you at the beginning. It's Heidi, myself, Andrew. Just kind of meeting on a regular basis, moving things forward, making sure all the things are happening like they should. There'll be an internal county working team to think about what county locations make the most sense, what the funding is, all those sorts of things. So really focused on those kind of 2 county facility strategies. And then we have this local working group that will look at some of those external strategies, like what businesses do we want to talk to, what sort of information do they need in this packet, what communities are interested in an EV plan that we could help with this template, that sort of thing. So you can sort of think of it as the internal and then the partnership groups. So with that, I just wanted to kind of hop into how we're going to get it done. This is kind of quick, but this is our first guess at a timeline. You can see we sort of prioritize some being earlier in this 18-month period and some being later. This will evolve as we implement, likely, but this is sort of our first guess of how these are going to get done, starting with setting up this working group and kind of getting this ledger finalized. We have a draft right now of all the ideas that folks in our workshops have come up with, but we want to kind of finalize it and keep it moving. In parallel, we'll be running those county-specific strategies through that county working group. And then we'll start developing materials for businesses and communities to kind of promote EV charging. And we've kind of got this resiliency hub later, but I know that the emergency services is sort of interested in having this conversation, so that might move up and we might kind of slow walk that conversation through this whole time with the goal of having at least an idea of what that pilot is and what the funding might be at the end of this 18 months. We don't imagine that it's going to be implemented in that time because it's a big project.
I had a quick question. I mean, this is off topic, but you know, we have a lot of tourists. 4.5
Yes.
million people come through Larimer County for Rocky National Park and other areas, probably even more than 4.5 million. So I know my children are really big on, you know, when they go out for a wedding or for travel, they rent a EV car, and then they have to do a lot of time planning. Where the stations are, where should we go, where's the businesses? Is that something that could be a resource we could hand to rental cars or have it tourists like visit, you know, Fort Collins, or hand people so they don't have to spend an more amount of time like, hey, here's where you can go. Here's a business, I mean, I can see this almost like a business friendly, hey, we get on this tourist list that, hey, they know that we're a friendly station, come charge. Then, because I know how much work they did, and then they had to completely change their route so they could follow their values and use a different vehicle. So I didn't know if someone had thought about that, because I've been trying to pull some of that data together for myself, because I have friends that say they're coming to visit and they're have a EV car, where can we go? And I'm like, oh wow, that's a good question. And I struggle, I'm still working on this list, so I wondered if we could pull a list like that for Larimer County, or even regionally, maybe just kind of draw a little circle just outside the borders, so that, I don't know, just curious about that. What do you think?
Yes, I'm hesitating a little bit. So yes, that's easy to do. We do have a map of all the current public charging stations in Larimer County that we've used for this planning process. My hesitancy is that it just gets updated so often, so keeping it up to date will be a trick. So we can either say, like, we have a map for Larimer County and here it is, or we can point folks to kind of some of the other resources that are updated that we pull that data from.
Kind of like a website that we could put up on our website that gets updated, and
Yeah, yeah.
and like a QR code that you could scan the QR, like a tourist season or tourist destination could scan the QR code. It takes you to kind of a mapping kind of thing. And I don't know, does that exist? And
Yes, there
Alright.
are maps that exist
Okay.
on like how to find EV charging, and most like EV owners have their favorite.
Okay.
But I like the rental car idea a lot because they're not as familiar with the space or
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm just curious about that, because I learned about Move It. I don't know if Move It's used here in the United States, but it was so helpful. I'm like, where have you been my whole life, or why didn't I know about this? So, okay, thank
Cool,
you.
Thank you. I think we've got another question over here.
Vince, Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, I just want to say there's about a half a dozen apps or more even that show you where charging stations are. And then for people who have Teslas, I think they can, that's kind of automatic for them on their screen, so.
Yeah. So I think it's just kind of informing probably those new folks where to do it, and then maybe some suggestions. Like I could see, okay, these highways or these corridors are EV rated or whatever, so you know you have charging every 50 miles or something like that.
Thank you very much.
Yep. So this gets into looking at the impact of each of these strategies and how that compares to the goals. There's a lot of information here, so I'm just going to draw your attention to this bottom bar down here. This is showing kind of in 2025, we anticipate to have 424 level 2 chargers as accumulation of these efforts plus kind of our projected growth there. And then in parentheses is the gap to the goal. So you can see we're on target because we were on target for the 2025 for level 2, but not level 3. And we've sort of sized these strategies to account for about 10% of that gap. You know, it's kind of not like the most, I don't know. This is a feel-good target, but there's so many people working in this space, we wanted to make it realistic and not have people think that, oh, the county's just going to deal with all of that and I don't have to work on it. So you can see here, this is the level 2 charging, the chart you've seen before with kind of this red triangle of where we think we're going to be. This 224 is sort of the cumulative impact of this high scenario plus the ones that we've got. And then this kind of 922 is the high scenario plus the additional ones from this plan. So you can see we're helping with this gap, not closing it entirely ourselves. And that story holds for level 3. You can see we've got a gap in 2025 as well as 2030. And kind of the same thing. We've got about 74 here and then 196. I'm hoping that the NEVI planning the state's going to do is going to help us with that 2025 target. And this is just information on costing if we want to get there. So that's the end of my presentation. I know there were some additional questions, so I'm happy to answer any questions. I've also got the plan up if we want to look at specific parts of the plan.
Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Kofalis.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation, Becca. And Andrew, thank you for your presence. A couple of questions. One is, where does the money come from to pay for all this?
That's a good question. Right now, to be honest, there's so much federal funding coming down that kind of the agencies are sort of scrambling to figure out how to, send it out and how to use it appropriately and things like that. So we do want to take advantage of a lot of that federal funding that's coming down.
Is that from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act or
Yes.
the other one?
Yes, and I think it's both. I think
Okay.
there's money from both.
What about, weren't there funds provided to the state as a result of the settlement with Volkswagen? I thought there was supposed to be a whole bunch of money for state EV charging stations. And
Yes.
maybe I'm misremembering.
No, you're remembering right. I don't know off the top of my head what that money is. Is that the? I can't. Yeah, there's definitely yes, there is money. So one of the things that we'll be tracking as a PM team is like where that money's being funneled and how we can take advantage of it. I will tell you, during this planning process, the state came to us and was like, "There's this grant that's due in a month. Can you do it?" And we're like, "We don't have any projects yet. We're not prepared to take advantage of that." So
May I just do a couple follow-up?
yeah.
Certainly, Commissioner, thank you.
Yeah. So it seems like the funding, there are mostly federal funding sources, perhaps others, contingent upon being successful with grant applications. What is the time frame for submitting grant applications? And what if our grant applications are not successful?
That's a good question. Time frame TBD. Like I said, everything's just, it's a big influx right now. So there's a couple of different options. There's the federal grant applications. The state also has the Charge Ahead Colorado grants, which would be applicable for any businesses that wanted to install charging. I would say, and Heidi, correct me if I'm wrong here, if for county facilities, I expect there's probably going to be some county dollars that would need to be allocated there as well.
Yes, Commissioner, we're actively looking together with an internal team, multi-department team, looking at what stations make the most amount of sense, what that structure looks like to be able to apply very soon, if possible, yes.
And the only other thing I would add on that is with your utility partners, there's a lot of rebates that are built in for some of these EV, infrastructure. I know with Xcel Energy, we're moving forward with our transportation electrification plan 2.0 in front of the PUC later on this year, and there's some rebates that are baked in for both individuals and businesses. So there's kind of 8 different layers to that plan there, and there'll be some allocated rebates with those as well.
Thank you, Andrew. One more question, and then I'll pause for a bit. Again, not to let our friend from Xcel Energy off the hook too much, with all of this potential increased capacity for electrical cars, that's going to have a lot of impact on our electrical generation and transmission grid. How is Xcel preparing for that in terms of redundancy, resiliency, and also related to that, a second question, and that is, at some point, how will we be able to determine what percentage of the electricity that's going to power these EV cars is coming from renewable sources, so that one day we can actually say this is, really significant lowering of carbon footprint and all of that? Thank you very much.
Well, you're going to get me to geek out on some of the energy conversations I get to have all the time, John. So this is great. So we have a couple different goals here with Xcel Energy. One being 80% carbon-free reduction by 2030 from 2005 levels, and by 2050 we want to be 100% carbon-free I can get you some of the energy mixes that we have on the daily mix, but we are on target to have 85% of our generation on our grid here in the state of Colorado carbon-free by 2030. And how we are doing that is some larger infrastructure projects that were on the Eastern Plains, Colorado Pathways, if you guys are familiar, which is a large transmission project that's getting third-party interconnections going as we speak right now. We broke ground on that project about a month ago. It goes through 11 different counties, and that's going to be where we're going to get a substantial amount of the renewable energy onto Xcel Energy's grid. And to your second question that I wanted to make sure I answered is, we are building in the EV plan, and Xcel Energy has we want to be able to service in our territory by 2030, 1.5 million electric vehicles in the state of Colorado. So it's part of our capacity planning. Our capacity planners are aware of projects like Partners in Energy here with Larimer County and several other EV programs that we're doing throughout the state. They have a lot of influence on that TEP, like I mentioned, and that's all built into our capacity planning. And I know that's, I don't want to speak for our other utility partners, but I know that's part of their mix as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, so the graphs that you're showing don't include the NEVI program. So, right, is that what you're saying?
They include any existing DC fast charging that would count towards those NEVI corridors, but it doesn't count any like projected installations for the NEVI corridors, correct?
And so the NEVI corridors are most of the state and interstate highways across the state. Is that right? And was Colorado added to those numbers? Thank you for pulling
Yeah,
that up.
sorry, I'm gonna give you a headache for a second while I
No,
grab
that's
the
all right.
map.
I appreciate it. Thank you for.
Here it is. Let's
So
see
those
if I
are the ones that are identified in our area.
Oops, sorry about that. How did I? Yeah.
Was Highway 14 one of those?
I think part of Highway 14.
Part
Here
of
we
it.
go.
Okay.
There we go. So, no, Highway 14 is not.
It was
That's right.
not
So that's
identified.
one that I
Okay.
think has opportunity, especially when we were talking to the MPO and their role in all of this.
Right.
They were talking about maybe they can kind of connect what Larimer County's doing with Weld County activities and try and get some of those, because we know we get a ton of people coming in from the east. So we want to, just because our border happens to be kind of right there, we don't want to ignore those corridors, but we're going to need partnerships in Weld County.
Yeah, and probably upper Front Range transportation planning region with some of those more remote parts of 14. So that's, I think that that's good, and I think that it seems like we can add corridors to the NEVI program so I think we can also push for some of that if we're not able to extend out our, capabilities. So,
Yeah.
no, that's great.
I
I think that'll serve a lot of the major places that people go, but it's some of those back region places where we want people still to be able to visit. And clearly in Colorado, recreation is really important, and it's something where if if there's no charging and your battery can't go as far as you want to go, people will not visit some of these places that we want people to visit. So, all right, thanks for pulling that up. And then I thought I had something else, but I don't see it, so thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. That was a conversation we had with our Poudre Valley REA partners quite a bit. There's a lot of these kind of trailheads and destinations that we'd love to have charging at, and the availability of electrical infrastructure is one of those like big questions. Like, do we have the infrastructure there? And then if we have to build infrastructure, do people really want us building infrastructure to this trailhead when a lot of people kind of appreciate the naturalness and wildness of it? So that's going to be a conversation that I think will be ongoing.
Thank you very much. This has been an excellent presentation. Lorinda, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Oh, right. Yeah, I will. I just want to say thank you to the team. This every time we do an hour-long presentation, it's all kind of boiled down to just a moment in time, but a lot of work has gone into this, and I know Heidi's been really great at shepherding this and the internal plan and all the other plans we have going. I just want to give kudos to you for all you do to keep us moving in these bite-sized pieces as we approach what our climate smart action plan might look like. And I believe there's a presentation that needs to happen, perhaps to you all.
Absolutely. So as we got to present this today, I did want to present to you guys an award for entering in the Partners of Energy with Larimer County. So I have a certificate here for you guys. and a nice memento to kick off this journey with you guys.
Awesome. Well, we should take a photo then, because we're not being televised. Well, I want to just thank Andrew and Becca and Heidi. Yes, Lauren, I agree with you, Heidi. I know you've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and along with your intern, I'm losing her name right now. But I just wanted to say thank you so much. This is really exciting, and certainly sparking some questions for me about that gap for 2030. So look forward to hearing more about that. But I just really appreciate you both being here today. And Heidi, well done, excellent work. And I would love to take a moment to maybe take a photo op, because that's something to celebrate. So
And
thank
be
you
sure
for the
to-
award.
To thank your department teams too, because
Yeah.
there's about 3 or 4 different departments that are engaged with this. So this is really a team effort.
Well, and I was looking at the list again, and just to remind the public, our hardworking staff have duties that are assigned, and most of this work that you see, kind of these things, are way above and beyond duties as assigned. But this is because they care so much about the county and the work that they do. And thank you to all those names on the list. And Mark, thank you for all that. I'm sure you and your team are providing a lot of IT access. Actually saw another data dashboard your team's helping with. I was very impressed. Thank you very much. And I just want to just make sure they all know how much we appreciate their extra work. But excellent. And this will be available on the website, on our SIPSO, but folks have more information and want to dive into that. I appreciate that. So we'll go ahead and adjourn and take a moment to take a quick photo. So thank you.